know, it's not unusual to have published documents from anonymous or unknown authors or sources. And sometimes you come across something that is special. Now, the question concerning the Voynich manuscript is, if this manuscript was encrypted and written in, let's say, 15th century English, would the information in it be of any value? What makes this manuscript special is that, one, it's pretty old, 15th century, about 600 years. In the early 1400s, 1404 to 1438. Two, the author is still unconfirmed. And three, it has yet to be deciphered. So in cryptography, which is basically the study of coding, it is about writing and solving codes. This could be used in art, in writing, and in computer science. And in cryptography, there are two types of encryption, symmetrical and asymmetrical. The way it is described is, think of it as a door, and behind that door is information. You have a key to that door so that you can lock it or encrypt it, or you can unlock it, decrypt it. This is to secure the information behind the door so that only you and anyone else who has that key can access that information. This manuscript is not only a mystery, it has quite the lengthy history. And most of that history involves people trying to figure out what it is, rather than being able to use the information that is in it. So let's take a closer look at what is also known as the cipher manuscript. So let me give you guys a brief history lesson on this, as I am sure there are several of you who haven't had a chance to look into this yet. In New York City, 1960, a musician and writer by the name of Ethel Voynich died in her home at the age of 96. All her remaining possessions were passed on to her friend, Anne Nill, who was her companion in her later years after her husband had passed. Now, of these possessions, sealed in a bank vault, was an old, plain, brown manuscript with no title. It is a fairly sized manuscript with about 240 pages, well, around 206 pages, not including the 30 pages that are missing due to it being centuries old and apparently being passed along the hands of several individuals throughout history. It is in very poor condition. When you open this manuscript, there is page after page of writings in an unknown language, along with illustrations of what appears to be plants, herbs, flowers that seemed beyond exotic, colored with red, green, yellow, and blue, accompanied with unusual depictions. Divided into 18 quires, the book has several folios that fold out to reveal more illustrations. It seems to be also divided into three main sections. The first section seems to focus on botanicals, herbs, plants, roots. The second section seems to focus on cosmology and astrology with astrological symbolism. The third section seems to be the most difficult section to figure out, with its bizarre depictions of naked women in baths, etc., as well as more herbs and plants, and ending with pages and pages of sectioned text, which they call the recipe section. Now, Ethel's husband Wilfrid Voynich, spent some time trying to decode it as he attempted to find a buyer for it. For over 50 years, this manuscript stayed in their possession as Wilfrid tried to decode it and died trying. Not even a year after Ethel's death, the manuscript was sold off to a buyer who wanted to resell it. But because he could not find a buyer for it, he donated the manuscript to Yale University in 1969, where it remains today. Now, before this manuscript was in the hands of Voynich, it of course had another name, the cipher manuscript. At least that is what Ethel called it in a short letter she wrote that was tucked inside the envelope of the book. In order to understand what this manuscript is, we have to understand why someone would write it to begin with. Is it just a hoax? Is someone trying to troll people who want to decipher it? Not likely. And that is due to the expensive nature of the binding and paper, which is calfskin, and the fact that something like this can't be put together overnight. I will say this. It reminds me of some other type of text, and I'll get to that in a moment. When it comes to the Voynich manuscript, to get a better idea of where the influence of its encryption comes from, we have to go back and look at guess. Take a guess. That's right, ancient Egypt. Hieroglyphic transformations. You can see the steganography in the manuscript, which is rooted in Egyptian encryption. If you were to take a look at the previous owners of this manuscript before Voynich, you would find that the closest to finding an author is Roger Bacon. But the book isn't that old. That would be around the 13th century. They say the Roman Emperor Rudolph II was involved. Doctor and scientist Johannes Marci, alchemist George Berish, they think this book has been through several hands, and the two main themes riding with this book are alchemy and the occult. It is an esoteric codex. Even Terence McKenna, you know, DMT guy, the ethnobotanist and mystic, he even says that it is truly an occult book, one that no one can read. Who knows? Maybe you need to be in a different mind realm to read it. But since the texts are encrypted, the illustrations are probably encrypted as well. Now, I have gone through this manuscript. You can actually pull it up on Yale's digital collection. The link is in the description box below. I have looked at this, and it is definitely laid out 15th century style. The illustrations surrounding the text, very Renaissance. Now, I recently did a presentation on biblical text. There exists a King James version of the Bible, but we all know King James didn't write the Bible. Are you with me so far? The writers of those books in the Bible didn't just sit down and start writing off the top of their heads. They had to pull resources. If you were to write a book, you would have to do the same. So with that said, it's not so much who wrote the Voynich manuscript, but where is the information that is in the manuscript taken from? In other words, what was the inspiration for this manuscript to be produced? Like I said, this reminds me of other manuscripts that exist. Actually, you have to understand that in the 15th century Renaissance, they were into magic and the occult big time. Necromancy, it was a business back then. And there are several books on the subject that probably date to that time period, like a grimoire or textbook of magic. There is no reason to encrypt a book of medicine or information that you want to share with others. I want you to notice something. You guys are familiar with H.P. Lovecraft, right? a lot of tentacle imagery, right? What do you see in the Voynich manuscript? Tentacle imagery. The plants or herbs illustrated are symbolic with its branching of one thing coming out of something else, and the tentacle-like roots in many of these illustrations. Do you guys know what a mandrake is? It's a plant that is often used in ritual magic, Odinism, heathenism, Wiccan, and several other pagan practices. The writing in the Voynich manuscript, although the writing is unknown, it does take on characteristics of a writing system I've seen before. Do you guys know what Theban is? It's known as the witch's alphabet, and it is a way to write spells while disguising the words. Once again, this all goes back to Egypt, but there is something else. The characters in the writing, although they remind me of Theban writing, it also looks like ancient Germanic runic writing. That character that looks like a 4, that character that looks like an 8, that character that looks like a 9. You can pull up these alphabets and make the comparisons yourself. I'm surprised I haven't heard of anyone who has studied this manuscript bring it up. Maybe they have. You tell me. To me, the Voynich manuscript is not much of a mystery, although it has remained a mystery for 600 years. To me, given the place and time period it was written, it is what I feel it is, a practical grimoire, a book of spells or recipes, but there could also be a lot of ethnobotany information in there too, meaning it's just a compilation of plants from different indigenous cultures and their uses for their plants and herbs. Who knows? But the person who wrote it and the people it was intended for, which is probably not us, and simply because the information is coded, kind of lets me know that it's not just an innocent science textbook. Anyway, that's my case. Let me know what you think this manuscript is and any ideas you have about it. There is more to come, more to explore. If you haven't already, be sure to visit woodwardentertainment.com and the Woodward Entertainment store. You can follow me on Instagram at jwoodward. And until next time, friends, remember, stay awake, stay aware, stay safe, and I'll talk to you all soon.